No, we'll switch.
Am I on? I think I'm on, right? Click, click, click. Good. So I should have prepared more slides because I have one. But it goes without saying that we're hiring. So let's just get that out of the way. And in reference to my good colleague from Yahoo, I remember back May 9th, 2008 at 3 a.m. when they sent the check of us being acquired, that a week before that, as part of the due diligence, where we talked about what I believe was absolutely fantastic technology on us having sourced specific network cards, built one units, built our own file system, built our own DB, built our own query language, had a fantastic system on top of it. And the chief scientist of Yahoo at that point kind of came in with a conclusion, which was, oh, that's very nifty. And I thought, I spent 4 years in the outskirts of Budapest to build this, and you think it's very nifty? I think not. We ended up being acquired anyway, and it's a good story. But let me just in short present who we are, what we do, and kind of highlight 3 challenges that I think we have in our specific industry. So we set out to help news media, and that might just sound completely delusional, and who would go work for anybody who've decided to attack that industry, because that is in complete flux at the moment. We think that is an opportunity, and that's, I think, the profile of any one of us up here, which says there might be an opening. And what we set out to do here is not to personalize, but to make sure that the editor of the Washington Post or Le Monde or the Sun or the Telegraph have a proper decision support system in place when he goes and programs the front page or the section front page of his destination. So if you write Bloomberg.com or Businessweek or Le Monde, you would expect that a set of stories which he decided to put on that front page have been going through that editor. For the most part, what you'll see in any decent-sized destination right now is that those decisions are not data-driven. They are very much based on, to put it politely, gut feel and Diet Coke. And we think we can apply just a little bit of science to that equation. So what we come up with, and you should think about this really when you go program that homepage, whether that be on yahoo.com or on Le Monde, is that at 1 o'clock, even if you look at 1 o'clock data, that homepage is not going to be consumed by 1 o'clock people. It's going to be consumed by 110 or 120 people. So you need to be able to predict what you believe they might be interested in 15 minutes or 20 minutes or half an hour into the future. But you can't do it in such a way that you naively believe that you can overtake the job of the editor, because that is probably never happening. And it probably never should happen, but that's a completely different discussion we could have. But the 3 challenges that we certainly work with here is that, given the fact that we work with news media, and usually expand that, so even for us, a Fast Company or a Wired or an InStyle or a People magazine are all news media to us, in the fact that they produce content on a daily basis, which they go promote on a destination which they own, and they've hired a set of editors to do so. But that first challenge is that we cannot just optimize to a maximum. So if you walk into Best Buy and try to make the most of their data and make sure that they have the right product in the right place at the right time, you can probably optimize the hell out of that, and it doesn't really matter whether you sell, Sony over LG, I presume. But you could certainly maximize aggressively. But 3 months ago, as we were moving towards the French election and we helped the editors at Le Monde decide which stories to go with, I can't just optimize to that maximum. I need to optimize within a defined editorial framework. I need to make sure I make the most of that editorial tone and whatever integrity that they have in place. But I can't just surrender to what they would describe as the lowest common denominator. And we can talk about what that might be. But that actually makes, I think, our challenge a whole lot more difficult, because any model, and however you build it, will end up trying to maximize within that. But we need to figure out how not just jump to that. Because if we get too far ahead of ourselves, what we've seen, and I can see in hindsight now that I was completely naive, because I just went in with all guns blazing 2 years ago to the first set of editors. And that was certainly a turn-off. And they would look at those recommendations thinking, what an idiot. What are you doing here? And we need to kind of pull that back a bit. So that's the first challenge, is that you cannot optimize in media in the same way that you can do in travel or retail or what have you. The second challenge that we certainly work with, which is not far removed from what we've heard from sell-through, is that the items that we work with operate within a very compressed window, meaning that the Puma sneakers there were probably the same 2 months ago, they're the same today, and they're likely to be the same 2 months from now, unless you spend some of that $20 million on new sneakers. But hey, that aside, if Whitney Houston dies, she was alive yesterday, she died today, and tomorrow it might not matter. So that window is so compressed, and the past doesn't really look anything like the future. And that means that the data sets which we have might be big data, but it's super compressed. And some of those learnings are, I think, more difficult to kind of work with compared to other industries, which is just so unfair, because any view on Amazon, the return on that view is tenfold over one view on the Washington Post, given the way they kind of monetize those views. So that's the second challenge. The third challenge is that in any optimization, whatever content modeling which you put in place, you can accept the fact that you have noise embedded into this data set, where almost there is good enough, where sending out one story over another or the order is slightly different might actually work. I'm not sure how that will work with you guys, but it might work. Or even go search on Google. We're not going to get presented the same 10 results, all of us. So they can actually have noise in that data set. I cannot have noise in my data set to the extent where those 3 stories on the French selection, that one of them disappears because I didn't either crawl, parse, or make sense of that piece of content the right way. There's simply not really much option for me to make errors here, because that error is going to be put on a pedestal to the point where they'll conclude that the concept of the data-driven newsroom just doesn't work. It doesn't exist. And we've seen by the fact that that important story that you should have surfaced or you should have helped me with didn't even exist. So I think we operate certainly in a world where, if not at 100%, we're kind of forced to be very close to that. And when I say challenges, I think we've been able to solve a whole bunch of them, and we come up with a platform where if you walked into the Sun, and it doesn't matter what we think of the Sun here in England, or the Telegraph, or Le Monde, or the New York Daily News, or Forbes, but if you walk into any one of those newsrooms, what you'll see today is that we're there in a sense that they've understood that we don't dictate what is put on the agenda today, but they're certainly inspired to the extent where we see somewhere in between 5, 10, 15, all the way up to 20% of the recommendations that we provide being executed. And you might think 80% being discarded is somewhat of a failure. We think we've been super successful in being able to tell my mom that you should go to the destination of this and this site back home. That story I pick, that's actually what we suggested. And we kind of make it most of the time, every day on some destination. But there's tons of stories that just don't make it, and that is okay. So that's the short story. The fact that we need to be close to 100%, I'll let Jeroen just speak a little bit about that as well.
Thank you, Dennis.
Take it away.
So in the past 5 minutes, Dennis has been speaking about the data-driven newsroom. And as a data scientist, I want to do the exact opposite. I want to talk about newsroom-driven data. Right. So at Visual Revenue, we believe that if you want to use your data, if you want to leverage your data for your business, then your business should determine your data. And that includes data collection, data transformation, visualization, and even modeling. And I'm saying this because nowadays it's all about big data. Everybody's going crazy about it. And so at Visual Revenue, it's critical for our business that we have good data. So that's what we're interested in most. If we have good data first, then we can talk about big data later. So to give you some more context, and Dennis has been speaking about this earlier, and what kind of space we're operating from a data point of view, I want to show you an animation. Okay, great. All right, so what you're looking at is an abstract representation of a front page where each row corresponds to a zone or a module on that front page, like breaking news, top story, latest news, or most popular stories. And each column corresponds to a position in that zone. Each circle here represents an article, and the size of that circle is the number of clicks that article received within 5 minutes. And so it illustrates the activity from a viewer perspective, but more importantly, the activity from an editor perspective. And every once in a while, you can see a circle move or disappear or come up, and that actually means that the editor has rearranged the front page. And I say rearrange is actually in a data from a data point of view. We should not forget that behind this data, there are actually editors thinking very hard about what news to put where, and they have the responsibility to show us the news that is most important at that time. So with that said, I want to talk about a new feature that we've been working on. Great. And that is predicting, or actually formulating recommendation for an unpublished article. So how do we, for example, predict the number of clicks for an article that doesn't have any click history? The solution is to use its content. And for that we use content modeling. Wait. Yes, that's right. So in a high level, we do this in 3 steps. We extract the content from a news article. We model the content of all the news articles. And then we formulate a recommendation. And because I'm talking about newsroom-driven data, I'm going to discuss these 3 steps in reverse order. So I'm going to start at the output and work my way back into the input. So the third step is to formulate the recommendation. And this is not just some analytics. This is a focused, concise recommendation that actually tells you, you put this article on, you are advised to put this article on that position for so and so long. So these are recommendations that the editor can act upon. But that's not the focus of this talk. These recommendations are based on a model. So let's move on to the second step, and that's creating a model. Here I have an example of a content model or a visualization of it. This is based on about 10,000 articles from a large-scale financial destination that you may know. And this picture is a bit messy, so let's break it up. Each color here represents a category that the article is, where the article is being placed by the editor. Each dot is actually an article. The axes are not important. What is important is that when 2 articles are similar in content, they are placed next to each other. So in these plots, you can see that investing at the top, and then the second column, and leadership, they're actually, they don't share any, well, they share a little overlap, which is interesting. Business is all over the place, of course. And that's about it. So what I want to show here is this involves three challenges. First is how are we going to predict the number of clicks? And we cannot simply look at the most similar articles because of the short lifespan that news has. And another thing is that the data and the categories or the editorial tone do not always match up. There is some disconnect here. And the third thing is that this model was based on articles written in English, but because our clients are all over the world, we actually have to deal with many different languages. So, and these kind of challenges, you cannot really tackle them by just throwing more data at them. So we continue with the first step, which is content extraction. Actually, this slide should not have been here, but I've discussed it, so we can move on. Content extraction is very important. You may ask yourself, why is this data scientist concerned with this? This step may seem trivial, but if we fail to extract the content of a single article, then we cannot make a recommendation for that article. We are basically taking that article out of circulation. So data extraction is important. And we've looked at existing tools to do this. Some of them were too slow. Not all of them worked all the time. And that's why we decided to create a tool to extract the article from a web page ourselves. It handles Unicode, so the tool is called Reporter. It handles Unicode without any hassle. It's flexible because it makes little assumption about the HTML markup, and it has debugging features for when things do go wrong. Let me show you a couple of yeah, I'm almost done. Thanks. So here you can see an article web page. All the elements have a color, which actually corresponds to the score it receives from a reporter. The greener, the better. And the article here is actually aligned with a blue dashed line, and that's the text that's being returned. Next slide. No problem with Unicode, as I said. And even when you have an article page which is a part of a gallery and contains little text, Reporter has no problem. Of course, since extracting data is not just a challenge for us, but for everybody working with HTML content, we've decided to make Reporter open source and share it with you. So within the next couple of weeks, you will see Reporter appearing on GitHub, and we will post it on our blog. So if you're interested in it and you love good data just like we do, then make sure to subscribe to our blog. So to wrap up, I just want to reiterate that, of course, big data has a lot of potential, but for our business, it's also critical that this is good data. And with that, I want to thank you for listening.